Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that'll take us back to biology class, but not the kind you might be picturing.
Yeah, no pop quizzes here.
This is more like a one-on-one lesson exploring how scientists throughout history tried to figure out, well, heredity, how traits get passed down.
Exactly. Long before we knew about genes or DNA, people were trying to crack that code. And some of their ideas were, well, let's just say, pretty creative.
So it's like a journey through the history of genetics.
You could say that, and you might be surprised by some of the theories they came up with.
All right, I'm ready to go back in time. Where do we begin?
Well, I think we should start with something familiar. Have you ever wondered how dog breeders get those consistent traits in different breeds?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, how do you always know a Labrador is going to be yellow, black, or chocolate?
Exactly. That's selective breeding. People have been doing it for centuries, way before they knew the science behind it.
So, like, just picking the dogs with the traits they wanted and breeding them together.
Exactly. And over time, they could really refine those features.
So even without knowing about genes, people understood that traits were inherited. But how did they try to explain it?
Well, we have to travel back to ancient Greece for that. Hippocrates, the father of medicine,
Yeah, I heard the name.
he believed that every part of the body contributed tiny particles to the seeds that created a new person.
So, like, each organ sends a little representative.
Pretty much. And then Aristotle came along and he thought male and female semen actually mixed to form the offspring.
Interesting. But obviously not quite right.
Nope, not quite. But hey, this was way before microscopes or anything like that. They were working with what they had.
Makes sense. Did those ideas stick around for a while?
Oh, yeah, for centuries. That idea, called pangenesis, was pretty popular. It basically said particles from all parts of the body traveled to the reproductive organs and got passed down.
So if your dad lost a finger, you might be born missing one.
That was the thinking. Sounds wild now, but it even influenced our language. Phrases like blood relative or royal blood.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. But if everyone believed it, how did it get debunked?
Science is all about testing old ideas. In the 1870s, Francis Galton, Darwin's cousin, did some experiments that proved pangenesis wrong.
So science is a process of constantly learning and refining.
Absolutely. And there were plenty more misconceptions along the way. Like in the 1600s, William Harvey came up with epigenesis, the idea that embryos develop in stages. Closer to the truth, but still missing some key details.
Okay, makes sense. So were there any other interesting theories?
Oh, there's one you'll love. Anton van Leeuwenhoek, the guy who invented the microscope, discovered what he called animalcules in semen.
Animalcules, what are those?
He thought they were tiny, preformed humans, like little embryos just waiting for a uterus to grow in.
Wow. It's amazing how technology can change our understanding so much.
Right. It shows that even the most brilliant minds can be limited by the tools of their time.
Makes sense. So even with all these brilliant minds, the mystery of inheritance was still unsolved.
Yeah, even Charles Darwin, the evolution guy.
Of course.
He struggled with how inheritance worked. He knew variation in offspring was important for natural selection, but couldn't explain how those variations were passed down.
So who finally cracked the code?
That's where our story takes a turn. Enter Gregor Mendel, a monk working with, get this, pea plants.
Pea plants. That's where things get interesting. Pea plants, huh? Not exactly what I pictured when we started talking about the history of genetics.
Well, trust me, those pea plants were key. Mendel's work with them really changed everything.
All right, I'm all ears. Why were pea plants so special for these experiments?
Mendel was really smart in choosing them. First, they have a bunch of traits that are easy to see and they come in like clear-cut forms.
Oh, so like you can easily tell them apart. Got it.
Exactly, like flower color. It's either purple or white, no in between, or seed shape, smooth or wrinkled. Made tracking the changes over generations much easier.
That makes sense. It's all about those obvious differences. Anything else that made peas a good choice?
Yeah, they can actually self-fertilize, so they reproduce with themselves.
So we didn't have to like manually cross-pollinate every time.
Exactly. It gave him a lot of control over the experiment. He could create these true breeding lines.
True breeding, what does that mean?
It means that when the plant fertilizes itself, it always produces offspring with the same trait. So a true breeding purple flower will only make more purple flowers.
Ah, so like a guaranteed outcome. Okay, I get it. So what did he actually do with these pea plants?
He started crossbreeding them, taking plants with different traits and, seeing what happened with their offspring.
So like a purple flower with a white flower.
Exactly. Now, if those old blending theories were true, what do you think the offspring would look like?
I guess, like a light purple, a mix of the two.
That's what you'd think, right? But that's not what happened at all.
Oh, what did he see then?
All of the offspring in that first generation had purple flowers. It was like the white trait just vanished.
Wow, so no blending. That's a surprise. What did Mendel think about that?
Well, he kept going. He took those first generation plants, which were kind of like hybrids since they came from different parents, and he crossed them with each other.
Okay, so purple hybrid flower with another purple hybrid. What happened next?
That's where things get really interesting. In that second generation, the white flowers came back.
They did.
Right.
But they weren't there in the first generation at all. It's like they were hiding or something.
Exactly. That's what led Mendel to his idea of dominant and recessive traits. The purple flower was dominant, so it masked the white, which was recessive.
So even though those first generation plants all looked purple, they were carrying the information for both colors.
You got it. We call those units of inheritance genes now. Each parent gives one gene for a trait, and in this case, the purple was just, well, stronger.
So those white flower genes were just waiting for their chance to show up again. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool pattern. Mendel called it the law of segregation. Basically, those two genes for each trait separate when the reproductive cells are made.
Okay, that makes sense. It's amazing how he figured all this out just from pea plants. Did he have any other big discoveries?
Oh, yeah. He also found that the genes for different traits, like the flower color and seed shape, were inherited independently.
So like if a pea plant inherited the purple flower gene, it didn't automatically get the smooth seed gene too.
Exactly. They weren't linked together. It's called the principle of independent assortment.
So these laws of inheritance, that's what we still base genetics on today.
Yep. Pretty amazing for someone working with just pea plants in a garden.
It really is.
Huh?
But if his work was so groundbreaking, why didn't it, change biology right away? Why did it take so long for people to notice?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the next chapter in our story, because unfortunately, Mendel's work was pretty much ignored while he was alive.
So Mendel's work was just ignored. That seems hard to believe given how important it is now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head-scratcher. But I think there are a few reasons why. For one, Mendel wasn't really part of the, mainstream scientific world.
Right, he was a monk. So maybe his work didn't reach the right people.
Exactly. Plus, his research was pretty heavy on the math and statistics, which wasn't that common in biology back then.
Ah, so it might have gone over some people's heads. Too ahead of its time, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. It didn't really fit in with how people thought about biology at the time. But luckily, his discoveries didn't stay hidden forever.
So someone eventually found his work.
It's actually even more interesting than that. In the early 1900s, 3 different scientists, all working independently, rediscovered Mendel's work.
Wow, 3 separate people. What were the odds?
It just shows you how important his ideas were. They were all working on similar problems with inheritance, and bam! Mendel's principles explained everything.
It's like all the pieces suddenly fell into place.
Exactly. And they made sure everyone in the scientific community knew about Mendel's genius.
So it's like he finally got the recognition he deserved. What happened after that? Did everyone start researching Mendel's ideas?
Oh yeah, it kicked off a ton of new research. Everyone was applying his principles to different organisms, testing them out. And around the same time, scientists discovered chromosomes inside cells.
Chromosomes, right? Those little thread-like things in the nucleus.
Those are the ones. And you know what? They behaved exactly like those factors Mendel was talking about.
Really? How so?
Well, scientists watched how chromosomes acted during cell division, and it perfectly matched Mendel's laws of inheritance.
It's like the chromosomes were reading from Mendel's playbook.
That's a great way to put it. So now they had a physical location for those mysterious factors. But the question was, what on those chromosomes was actually responsible for carrying the traits?
That's a big question. Did they figure it out?
That discovery takes us into the world of DNA. You know, that famous double helix, the blueprint of life?
Yeah, DNA. I remember learning about that. But how did they know that DNA, out of everything in the cell, was the key to heredity?
Well, that's a whole other depth dive. Maybe we can explore those groundbreaking experiments another time.
I love that. It's incredible how all these discoveries connect, like a puzzle slowly coming together.
Yeah, it's amazing. We started with ancient theories, traveled through some, let's say, creative ideas about inheritance, and ended up at the foundation of modern genetics with Mendel.
It's been quite a journey. From hidden genes to rediscoveries to chromosomes and DNA.
And it all started with a monk and his pea plants. Makes you wonder what other secrets are still waiting to be discovered, right?
Absolutely. It really makes you think.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating exploration of the history of heredity. Who knows what groundbreaking discoveries are just around